My next Patreon question is from Diver1994, who wanted to know whether certain real-life events are unfilmable. With the recent anniversary of the massacre at Columbine, my friend and I got into a discussion about movies and historical events. Personally, I think there's a very human story that you could tell about the massacre if you took the focus where it should be. But my friend disagrees. He thinks there are some historical events that should just be left alone, and Columbine is one of them. What do you think? Are there some historical events that should not be told on film? Do you think there should be a movie about the Columbine massacre? That's quite a heavy question, and one I'll try to answer the best I can. When dealing with depicting an historical event, especially a tragic one thing that certainly runs through a filmmaker's mind is how to go about it without being exploitative. You don't want to trivialize something serious or risk turning it into cheap entertainment. To use the Columbine example, that is a subject matter filmmakers have been a little cautious about treading. Gus Van Sant's Elephant did attempt to portray a Columbine-like shooting, and I felt he succeeded doing it in a tasteful way. He took the approach of just following the students on their day, with the audience more like an outside observer. Elephant was not directed in a sensationalized way, and that gave it the needed effect. I think the best films based on tragic historical events take on a documentary-style approach. I remember shortly before Paul Greengrass's United 93 was released, there was a question of whether it was too soon to make a film about the September 11th attacks. However, Greengrass took the respectful approach by using then unknown actors to play the real-life people and aiming to be as accurate as possible instead of turning the Flight 93 hijacking into a full-blown Hollywood action movie. When Steven Spielberg made Schindler's List, he abandoned his usual filmmaking techniques and instead chose to film it with handheld cameras in black and white, as he did not want to turn the Holocaust into a colorful spectacle. Greengrass also recently depicted the 2011 Norway attacks in 22nd of July, and gave a lot of focus to the victims of the attack and what they went through that day. Like United 93, Greengrass dramatized the events in real time and opted for local Norwegian actors rather than movie stars. A large chunk of 22nd of July also takes place after the day, as we see the effect the attacks had on the survivors. As I mentioned, a big concern with these sorts of films is where they just exist to exploit a real tragedy. There are a few questions about this surrounding Quentin Tarantino's new film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which supposedly involves the Manson murders in some way. Some people are wondering if Tarantino is going to just use Sharon Tate's murder for shock value. As of this recording, I have not seen the movie yet, so I cannot say whether it's tasteful or not, although he does have the approval of Tate's sister Deborah, who is very protective of how her sister is portrayed in the media. There was also recent controversy surrounding the Ted Bundy biopic, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. There are many who felt the film glorified Bundy, and gives him more of the attention he craved at the expense of his victims. After Diver asked me this question, I watched the movie on Netflix, and it was certainly an unusual depiction of the famous serial killer. The film does not show much of him killing his victims and barely goes into how he did his crimes. Instead, it's framed in such a way where the audience is meant to wonder, did he or didn't he? I guess this is meant to reflect how the public themselves weren't sure, since Bundy supposedly came off as charming and sane in his court appearances. But the fact is, we know Ted Bundy murdered those women, and the movie does not even provide that much insight into him anyway. It's an example of how execution is everything when you want to depict a real-life murderer on film. You don't want to get across the wrong idea, even if the filmmakers don't intend to. So back to Columbine, I think there's a way to do it that's tasteful, and I think the key is making sure the victims and survivors are portrayed in a respectful light, and not spinning the events to suit a grander narrative. However, I don't think a film dramatizing Columbine will happen anytime soon. School shootings seem to have gotten even more frequent over the last few years, so it's a sensitive subject and not one you want to risk trivializing. Anyway, I hope I answered that question as best as I could, Diver.